The mining colony on Valara 7 had been peaceful for 300 years. The Vallani people worked in the crystal mines during the day and returned to their dome cities at night. They had families, schools, and small gardens where they grew flowers that glowed in the dark. The children played in the parks while their parents talked about simple things like weather and work. Nobody thought about war anymore. War was something from the old history books, something their ancestors had left behind. Genthar was the colony administrator. He was old even by Vallani standards, his shell faded to a pale blue that showed his many years. He sat in his office reviewing production reports when the first explosion hit. The whole building shook. His communication screen went dark for a moment, then flickered back to life, showing emergency alerts from every sector of the colony. Ships had appeared in orbit without warning. 12 massive vessels, black and angular, bristling with weapons. They belonged to the Carthex Dominion, a species that conquered worlds and enslaved populations. They had been expanding their territory for decades, and now they had come to Valara 7. The defense platforms around the colony activated automatically, but they were designed to stop asteroids and space debris, not warships. The Carthex destroyed them in minutes. Then the bombardment began. Energy beams rained down from the sky, turning buildings to rubble and setting fires across the colony. The Vallani had no weapons to fight back. They had none. Genthar ran to the communications center. People were screaming in the streets outside. He could hear the thunder of explosions getting closer. His assistants were already dead, crushed when part of the ceiling collapsed. He pulled himself to the main console and activated the emergency broadcast system. His hands shook as he set the signal to transmit on all frequencies in every language known to the Galactic database. He had to make them understand. Someone had to hear. Someone had to care. "This is Valara 7, he said into the microphone, his voice breaking. "We are under attack. The Carthex Dominion is killing us. We have no weapons. We have no defense. We are miners, farmers, teachers. We have children here. Thousands of children." Another explosion rocked the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. He could smell smoke. "Rogamos misericordia," Genthar said, using the ancient human phrase he had learned years ago when studying alien cultures. "We beg for mercy. Please, anyone who can hear this, we are dying. Our children are dying. Please help us. Please, someone help us." He repeated the message in 12 different languages, then set it to loop. There was nothing else he could do. He looked out the window and saw Carthex drop ships descending through the smoke. Ground troops were coming. The message traveled through space at the speed of light, bouncing off relay stations and communication satellites. It reached the Galactic Council headquarters within an hour. The council chamber was an impressive room with seats arranged in a circle, each position representing one of the 12 member species. The delegates were in the middle of discussing trade regulations when the distress call interrupted their session. They listened in silence as Genthar's desperate voice filled the room. When the message ended, nobody spoke for a long moment. "This is unfortunate," said Vornash, the council speaker. He was a tall, thin creature with silver skin and large black eyes. "The Vallani are a peaceful people. They do not deserve this." "But they are not council members," said another delegate. "We have no legal obligation to intervene." "Legal obligation aside," said a third delegate, "military intervention against the Carthex would mean war. They have the second largest fleet in known space. The cost would be enormous." "The cost in Vallani lives is already enormous," someone pointed out. "Yes, but those are not our lives," Vornash said coldly. "We must consider the safety of our own populations first. A war with the Carthex could kill billions of our people." The debate continued for 3 hours. Every delegate agreed that the attack was terrible. Every delegate expressed sympathy for the Vallani. But when the vote came to authorize a rescue mission, the result was unanimous. The council would not intervene. They would send the Carthex a formal complaint through diplomatic channels. Nothing more. In the back of the chamber, in the small observation section reserved for species with limited council privileges, Ambassador Helen Price sat and listened. She was the human representative, and humans were still considered newcomers to galactic politics. They had been granted observer status only 5 years ago. They could watch council sessions but could not vote. Helen felt sick as she listened to the decision. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, and she understood the complexity of interstellar politics. But she also understood right and wrong. The Vallani were dying. and the most powerful organization in the galaxy was going to do nothing. She left the chamber and went directly to the communication room. She sent an urgent message to Earth's diplomatic corps and to the military command. The message was simple. Distress call received from Valara 7, Council refusing to act, awaiting instructions. The response came back within minutes. Earth Command ordered all human ships in the sector to stand down and wait for further diplomatic developments. No military action was authorized. Captain Jake Morrison was 42 years old and had been commanding the Valiant for 6 years. His ship was a mid-size cruiser, armed but designed primarily for exploration and patrol duties. They were 3 days away from Valara 7, mapping an asteroid field when the distress call came through. Morrison sat in his command chair and listened to the message 3 times. He heard Genthar's voice breaking. He heard the explosions in the background. He heard the desperate plea in 12 languages. "Sir, we're receiving orders from Earth Command," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Kate Phillips. She was young, only 24, fresh from the academy. "We're ordered to maintain position and await further instructions." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing their current location and the route to Valara 7. He looked at his crew. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. "How many human ships are in range of Valara 7? Morrison asked. Kate checked her console. 3 others, sir. The Defender, the Resolute, and the Liberty. All within 2 days' travel. Contact them," Morrison said. "I want to speak to all 3 captains immediately." Within 10 minutes, Morrison had 4 faces on his screen. Commander Lisa Grant of the Defender, Captain Danny Cooper of the Resolute, and Captain Ben Harper of the Liberty. "You all heard the distress call," Morrison said, "and you all got the same orders I did. Stand down and wait." "The Council voted against intervention," Lisa Grant said. She was older than Morrison, close to retirement with gray hair and sharp eyes. "They're afraid of the Carthex." "So is Earth Command," Danny Cooper added. He was the youngest captain, only 35. "They don't want to start a war we can't win." "How long before the Valani colony is completely destroyed?" Morrison asked. "Based on the intensity of the bombardment, maybe 24 hours, Ben Harper said. He was a tactical specialist, good with numbers. 40,000 civilians, most of them dead before the Council finishes their diplomatic complaints. Morrison made his decision. "I'm going to Valara 7, I'm going to help those people. Anyone who wants to join me can follow. Anyone who wants to obey orders can stay here. I'm not ordering anyone to come with me. This is my choice." There was a brief silence. "My ship will be ready to jump in 30 minutes, Lisa Grant said. "The Resolute is with you," Danny Cooper added. "Liberty's standing by," Ben Harper confirmed. Morrison looked at his own crew. Kate Phillips met his eyes and nodded. His tactical officer nodded. His engineer nodded. One by one, every member of his bridge crew agreed. "We didn't join the stars to watch people die," Morrison said quietly. "We go now. Maximum speed to Valara 7, we're going to answer that distress call." The 4 human ships changed course and jumped to faster than light speed. They were heading into a battle they might not survive, against an enemy stronger than them without permission from their government. They were going because someone had called for help, and nobody else had answered. Behind them, Earth Command was sending increasingly urgent messages ordering them to stop. Morrison turned off his communication system. He would deal with the consequences later. Right now, 40,000 people needed help, and he was going to give it to them. The Valiant and her 3 sister ships raced through space toward Valara 7. The 4 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valara 7 system. What they saw made their blood run cold. The beautiful blue planet was surrounded by debris fields where defense stations used to be. Pieces of destroyed ships floated in orbit. 12 Carthex warships hung in space like black predators, their weapons still firing down at the surface. Morrison could see the fires burning on the planet below, visible even from space. Cities were in ruins. The Carthex had been bombarding the colony for almost 2 days straight. "Tactical report," Morrison ordered. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Steve Parker, analyzed the enemy ships. 12 Carthex cruisers, sir. Each one is bigger than us. They outgun us 3-1. Shields are at full strength. They haven't detected us yet." Lisa Grant's face appeared on Morrison's screen. "Jake, this is suicide. We can't win against 12 ships." "We don't need to win," Morrison said. "We just need to make them stop killing civilians." "Options?" Steve Parker pulled up a tactical display. The Cartheks are arranged in a bombardment formation. They're stationary, focused on ground targets. If we come in fast from multiple angles using the debris fields for cover, we might get close enough to do real damage before they can coordinate a response. They won't expect us to attack, Danny Cooper said from the Resolute. We're smaller than them. They'll think we're insane. They'd be right, Ben Harper said. But I'm in. What's the plan? Morrison studied the tactical map. We split up. Defender and Liberty hit them from the left flank. Resolute and Valiant take the right. Target the ships that are actively bombarding the surface. Draw their fire away from the colony. Make them mad. Make them chase us. Ground forces? Lisa Grant asked. Once we engage the fleet, I'm sending down a Marine team, Morrison said. Lieutenant Danny, you've got family on Earth, right? 2 kids, Danny said. Then you stay in orbit with the Resolute. Defender Liberty with me. Let's go save some people. The 4 ships split up and accelerated into the system. They used the debris fields for cover, moving fast and unpredictable. The Cartheks didn't notice them until they were already in firing range. Morrison's ship came screaming in from the right side, weapons blazing. Energy beams lanced out from the Valiant, hitting a Carthex cruiser's shield. The alien ship rocked from the impact. Alarms started blaring on the Carthex bridge. The other human ships opened fire at the same time. Suddenly, the Carthex weren't hunting helpless miners anymore. They were under attack. The Carthex commander barked orders in his harsh language. 6 of his ships turned away from the planet to engage the human vessels. The bombardment slowed. On the surface, thousands of Villani who had been hiding in basements and tunnels felt the shaking stop. They looked up through the smoke and ash and dared to hope. The space battle was brutal. The Carthex ships were bigger and stronger, but the humans were faster and more creative. Morrison's crew worked like a machine. Steve Parker called out targets. Kate Phillips managed shield distribution, moving power where they needed it most. The engineer, a woman named Amy Watson, kept the engines running at 110% capacity. Enemy cruiser charging heavy weapons, Steve warned. They're targeting the Defender. Lisa, brake left. Morrison shouted into the comm. The Defender rolled hard but not fast enough. The Carthex beam caught her rear shields. The explosion tore through her engine room. The Defender went spinning, powerless, drifting through space. Defender is hit, Kate reported. Life support is stable, but engines are gone. They're dead in the water, Morrison swore. Resolute, cover the Defender. Liberty with me. We're going after that ship. The Valiant and Liberty came at the Carthex cruiser from 2 directions. They poured fire into its shields until the shields collapsed. Then their weapons bit into the hull itself. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship. It tried to turn and run, but it was too damaged. The Carthex cruiser broke apart in a ball of flame. The other Carthex ships pulled back, regrouping. They were confused. How were these small human ships causing so much damage? Now, Morrison said, launch the ground team. A dropship fell away from the Valiant's belly and plunged toward the planet. Inside, Lieutenant Danny Cooper led 30 Marines. They were all volunteers. Every single one of them knew they might not come back. The dropship hit the atmosphere hard, shaking and rattling. Through the windows, the Marines could see the devastation below. Entire sections of the colony were just rubble. Fires burned everywhere. Bodies lay in the streets. Landing zone is the central plaza, Danny told his team. Intel says there are about 500 Carthex ground troops rounding up civilians. Our job is to stop them. We hold until evacuation can begin. Understood? Yes, sir, the Marines answered. The dropship landed hard, its ramps dropping open. The Marines poured out into a nightmare. The central plaza was surrounded by burning buildings. Carthex soldiers in black armor were herding Villani civilians toward transport ships. The aliens looked like reptiles, tall and muscular with scaled skin and sharp teeth. They carried energy weapons and weren't shy about using them on anyone who resisted. Danny's Marines opened fire immediately. The Carthex hadn't expected armed resistance. Several of them fell in the first few seconds. The others scattered, taking cover behind debris and vehicles. The firefight was close and vicious. The Marines used every bit of training they had. They moved in teams, covering each other, pushing forward. The Carthex were tough and well-armed, but they fought like they expected to win easily. The humans fought like their lives depended on it because they did. Kate Phillips had left the Valiant on a smaller shuttle with 2 other crew members. While the Marines fought, she was making contact with the Villani resistance. There were still thousands of civilians alive hiding in the tunnel systems under the colony. "We need to get them out," Kate told a Volani named Siktal. He was young, maybe equivalent to a human teenager. His shell was cracked and he had burns on his arms. His family was dead. "The tunnels connect to the old mining shafts," Siktal said in broken but understandable human language. "We can lead people out there, but we need time. The Cartheks are searching building by building. We'll buy you time," Kate promised. "Get everyone moving. Head for the mining shafts on the eastern side of the colony. We'll have shuttles waiting." For 18 hours the battle raged. In space, the 3 remaining mobile human ships played a deadly game with the Carthex fleet. They couldn't win, but they didn't need to. They just needed to keep the enemy busy and protect the evacuation. On the ground, Danny's Marines fought from building to building, drawing the Carthex troops away from the civilians. They took casualties. Danny watched good people die, but they held their ground. Kate and Siktal led thousands of Volani through the dark tunnels. Old and young, injured and healthy, they stumbled through the darkness toward safety. Kate carried children who were too small to walk fast. Siktal stayed at the back, making sure nobody got left behind. The shuttles made trip after trip, pulling people up to the ships in orbit. Each load meant more lives saved. But the Carthex were getting organized. They knew what was happening now. They were sending reinforcements. "We can't hold much longer," Danny reported to Morrison. "We've lost 19 Marines. Ammunition is low. The Carthex are bringing in heavy weapons. Extraction is 90% complete," Morrison said. "Hold for another hour. Just one more hour." That hour felt like a year. The Marines fell back slowly, fighting every step of the way. Buildings exploded around them. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning. But they held. Finally, Kate's voice came over the comm. "Last shuttle is lifting off. All civilians are evacuated. Repeat, all civilians are clear. Marines, fall back to the extraction point," Danny ordered. "We're leaving. Now." The surviving Marines ran through the ruined streets toward the landing zone. The Carthex chased them, firing constantly. 2 more Marines fell. The others grabbed their bodies and kept running. They never left anyone behind. The dropship waited with its engines hot. The Marines piled in, and it lifted off just as Carthex soldiers reached the plaza. Enemy fire chased them into the sky, but they made it. They were clear. In orbit, Morrison assessed the situation. The Defender was crippled. The Liberty had lost its weapon systems. The Valiant and Resolute were both damaged. They had saved maybe 30,000 Volani civilians, but they couldn't fight anymore. "The Carthex are preparing to fire on us," Steve reported. "All ships targeting us. They're done playing around." "Then we run," Morrison said. "All ships prepare to jump. Get us out of here." The 4 human ships turned and fled. The Carthex fired after them, but the humans jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared. Behind them, the Carthex commanders looked at the damage. One of their cruisers destroyed, others damaged. Ground forces taking casualties, and somehow the humans had saved most of the civilians. The Carthex were impressed despite themselves. These humans fought with a fury they hadn't expected. They fought like they actually cared about the Volani. On the Valiant, Morrison sat in his command chair and looked at the casualty reports. 73 humans had died. 73 people who had volunteered to help strangers, but they had saved 30,000 Volani lives. Was it worth it? Kate asked quietly. Morrison thought about Genthar's desperate voice on that distress call. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Delegates were shouting at each other in a dozen different languages. Ambassador Helen Price stood in the center of it all, trying to remain calm while being verbally attacked from every direction. "Your species has committed an act of war," Vornash declared, his silver skin flushed darker with anger. "Without authorization, without legal standing, you attacked Carthex forces." "We responded to a distress call," Helen said firmly. The same distress call this council chose to ignore. "The situation required careful diplomacy," another delegate said. "You humans rushed in with your weapons like barbarians. Now the Carthex are demanding reparations and threatening retaliation." "Let them threaten," Helen said. "We saved 30,000 innocent lives. If that's barbaric, then I'm proud to be a barbarian." The council had been in session for 6 hours and it was getting nowhere. The majority of delegates wanted to sanction humanity, to punish them for their unauthorized military action. A few delegates representing smaller species were quietly supportive but afraid to speak up. The Cartheks have filed a formal complaint, Vornash continued. They claim you destroyed one of their ships and killed over 300 of their soldiers. They demand that you hand over Captain Morrison and his crew for trial. That's not happening, Helen said flatly. Our people are heroes. They did what was right when everyone else did nothing. Right and wrong are not relevant, Vornash said coldly. Only law matters. And you broke the law. Helen looked around the chamber at all the comfortable delegates sitting in their comfortable chairs. None of them had rushed to help the Villani. None of them had risked anything. Then your laws are worthless, she said. The chamber erupted again. Several delegates demanded that humanity be expelled from the council entirely. Others wanted economic sanctions. The debate raged on while Helen stood alone defending her species. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, a different conversation was happening. The Villani had access to the Galactic Information Network, and they were using it. Footage from Valara 7 was spreading everywhere. Videos showed human Marines shielding Villani children with their own bodies during the fighting. Images showed human medics treating wounded Villani with the same care they gave their own people. Recordings captured Kate Phillips carrying exhausted Villani civilians through the tunnels, refusing to leave anyone behind. One video went viral across hundreds of worlds. It showed a human Marine named Jack Turner, badly wounded and bleeding, who had given his medical supplies to a Villani child and then continued fighting. He died protecting that child. The child survived. The galactic public was moved in ways the council delegates weren't. Common people from 100 different species started talking about the humans. These newcomers, these supposedly primitive people, had done what the mighty Galactic Council would not. They had answered a call for help. On Valara 7, the situation was complicated. The Cartheks had withdrawn after the human attack, but they hadn't left the system entirely. They maintained a blockade, preventing anyone from entering or leaving. The colony was in ruins. Thousands were dead, but 30,000 had survived, and they owed their lives to humans. Captain Morrison had disobeyed orders from Earth and ignored warnings from the Galactic Council. Now his 4 ships were hiding in a nearby star system, trying to figure out what to do next. The Defender was barely functional. The other 3 ships were damaged but operational. Earth Command is furious, Kate Phillips reported. They're calling what we did an unauthorized military action. There's talk of a court-martial. Morrison sat in his quarters looking at the list of the 73 people who had died. He knew every name. He had written letters to their families, though he didn't know if he'd ever be able to send them. What about the Villani? He asked. They're asking for our help, Kate said. The colony is destroyed. They need food, medical supplies, shelter. Winter is coming on Valara 7 and thousands of people are homeless, Morrison stood up. Then we help them. Sir, we're supposed to return to Earth immediately, Kate said. If we don't go back, it'll make things worse. Things are already as bad as they can get, Morrison said. We saved those people. I'm not going to abandon them now. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're staying at Valara 7 until the situation is stable. They can court-martial me later. The Valiant, Resolute, and Liberty returned to Valara 7. The Cartheks ships tracked them but didn't attack. They seemed uncertain about what to do with these crazy humans who kept coming back. The 3 human ships landed on the planet's surface near the ruins of the main colony. The crews came out and started working. They had supplies on board, food and medicine and tools. They shared everything they had. Amy Watson, the Valiant's chief engineer, organized the medical response. She set up field hospitals in tents and started treating the wounded. She worked 20-hour days, sleeping only when she couldn't keep her eyes open anymore. The Villani were amazed by her dedication. Lieutenant Danny Cooper, who had led the ground assault, now led the reconstruction effort. His Marines became construction workers. They cleared rubble, repaired water systems, and helped rebuild homes. They worked alongside the Villani, communicating through translators and hand gestures and simple kindness. Ben Harper, captain of the Liberty, took on the task of training a Villani defense force. He taught them how to use weapons, how to coordinate defenses, how to protect themselves. He was determined that this would never happen to them again. Sigtal was one of his first students. The young Villani learned quickly. He was angry about what had happened to his world, to his family. But he was also grateful. The humans had saved him when nobody else would. Why did you come? Sigtal asked Ben one day during training. Your council said no. Your own government said no. Why did you come anyway? Ben thought about it for a long moment. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Because you needed help and we could give it. That's enough reason. In the galaxy, most species only care about themselves, Sigtal said. They think about profit and politics and safety. Nobody thinks about strangers on a distant world. But you did. Yeah, well, Ben said. Maybe we're just stupid that way. No, Sigtal said seriously. You're not stupid. You're good. There's a difference. Word continued to spread across the galaxy. Ships from other species started arriving at Valara 7 bringing supplies. They claimed they were on routine missions, but everyone knew the truth. They were inspired by what the humans had done. Small acts of defiance against the Council's cold indifference. The Therian Collective, a neutral confederation of trading species, sent 3 cargo ships full of food and building materials. They claimed it was a commercial transaction, but they charged nothing. Other species followed. The Villani colony started to recover, but dark clouds were gathering. The Carthex Dominion was not done. Their military command was meeting, planning their response. The humans had embarrassed them in front of the whole galaxy. That could not stand. In a war room deep inside a Carthex fortress world, generals studied star maps. One of them pointed to a cluster of stars in human territory. These are their outer colonies, the general said, lightly defended. Civilian populations. If they want to play the hero, let's see how they like being the victim. The Carthex High Command approved the plan. They would strike 3 human colonies simultaneously. They would show the galaxy what happened when you oppose the Dominion. On Earth, the government was divided. Some officials wanted to punish Morrison and his crew for their disobedience. Others saw them as heroes. The public was firmly on Morrison's side. When news of what they'd done spread across Earth, people celebrated. Finally, humanity had done something worth being proud of. Ambassador Helen Price was recalled from the Galactic Council. She returned to Earth expecting to be fired. Instead, she walked into a meeting with the President and the military command. The Council wants us to apologize, the President said. They want us to hand over Morrison and his crew. They want us to pay reparations to the Carthex. Are we going to do it? Helen asked. The President smiled grimly. Hell no. Morrison disobeyed orders, but he saved 30,000 lives. We're not apologizing for that. We're promoting him. The Carthex are going to retaliate, the military commander warned. Intel suggests they're planning strikes against our colonies. Then we prepare, the President said. We defend our people. And we make it clear to the Carthex that if they want a war, they'll get one. Helen felt a chill run through her. War with the Carthex would be terrible. Humanity was still young in galactic terms. Their military was small compared to the great powers. Thousands might die. But looking back, what choice had they really had? Ignore the distress call? Let the Villani die? Some things were more important than safety. On Valara 7, Morrison received a message from Earth Command. He expected it to be a reprimand or an order to return home. Instead, it was a promotion. He was now an admiral. His crew was being decorated for valor. Earth stood behind them. Morrison gathered his crew and read them the message. They cheered, exhausted and dirty and proud. They had done the right thing, and their world acknowledged it. But the message ended with a warning. The Carthex were coming. War was inevitable now. The price for mercy was going to be high. The attacks came without warning on a Tuesday morning across 3 human colonies. New Boston was hit first. The colony had been established 20 years ago on a planet with forests that looked almost like Earth. 15,000 people lived there, farming and logging and building a new life far from their homeworld. The Carthex ships appeared in orbit and started firing. There was no demand for surrender, no warning, no mercy. Sarah Klein was a teacher at the colony's school. She was reading to her class of 7-year-olds when the emergency sirens started. She knew what to do because they had practiced for this. Ever since Valara 7, every human colony had emergency drills. She gathered her students and led them toward the shelter beneath the school. They almost made it. The energy beam hit the school while Sarah and her students were on the stairs. The building collapsed. Sarah died shielding 3 children with her body. 2 of them survived because of her. Shepherd's Rest was the second target. It was a mining colony on an asteroid, home to 8,000 people who worked in the deep mines extracting rare metals. The Carthex didn't bother with bombardment. They sent boarding teams. The fighting in the narrow corridors was brutal and close. Miners fought back with mining tools and whatever weapons they could find. Carl Murphy was a shift supervisor. He was 56 years old with bad knees and gray hair. When the Carthage soldiers came into his section, he sealed the blast doors and flooded the corridor with toxic gas from the mining operation. He killed 30 Carthage soldiers and saved 200 miners. He died when the Carthage blew through the blast doors to get revenge. Terra Nova was the third target. It was the newest colony, only 5 years old, built on a moon with vast ice fields and underground oceans. 6,000 people lived there. The Carthage attack killed 4,000 in the first hour. The survivors sent out the same message the Volani had sent. "Please, someone help us. We are dying." This time the response was different. Human military ships were already moving before the distress call went out. Earth had been preparing for this. They knew the Carthage would strike back. They had ships positioned near the colonies waiting, but they weren't fast enough to save New Boston or Shepherd's Rest. By the time human warships arrived, those colonies were destroyed. Terra Nova held out long enough for rescue ships to arrive and evacuate 3,000 survivors. The other 3,000 were already dead. The casualty count was devastating. Nearly 20,000 humans killed in a single day. Children, families, people who had never held a weapon in their lives. The Carthage sent a message to Earth Command afterward. It was simple and brutal. "This is what happens when you interfere with the Dominion. We will take one of your lives for every life you saved at Valara 7. Consider this the first payment." Earth mourned. Every news channel showed images of the destroyed colonies. They showed pictures of the people who had died. Sarah Klein, who gave her life for her students. Carl Murphy, who saved 200 miners. Thousands of others. The Galactic Council met again. They offered their thoughts and prayers. They suggested that perhaps now humanity would understand why the Council hadn't intervened at Valara 7. Some conflicts were too dangerous to get involved in. Some prices were too high to pay. Ambassador Helen Price listened to their words and felt nothing but contempt. The Council was saying that humanity should have let the Volani die to avoid this. That 30,000 alien lives weren't worth 20,000 human lives. She stood up and addressed the Council. "You're telling us we should have abandoned the Volani to save ourselves. That we should have been cowards like you. But here's what you don't understand. We knew this might happen. We knew the Carthage might retaliate. And we saved the Volani anyway because it was right. Because some things matter more than safety. And now your people are dead," Vornash said. "Was it worth it?" Helen looked at him coldly. "Yes, it was worth it. And we'd do it again." She walked out of the council chamber. She was done trying to work with them. Humanity would fight this war alone. Admiral Chris Bennett was 60 years old and had been in the military his entire adult life. He was now in command of Earth's entire defense fleet. It wasn't a large fleet compared to the major galactic powers. Earth had maybe 200 warships of various sizes. The Carthage had thousands. But Bennett wasn't thinking about how to win a conventional war. He was thinking about how to hurt the Carthage badly enough that they'd think twice about attacking human colonies again. "We can't match them ship for ship," he told his staff. "So we don't fight that way. We hit their supply lines. We make them bleed. We make this war so expensive that they decide peace is cheaper." He sent out small strike teams to operate deep in Carthage territory. Their job was to cause chaos and destruction, to make the Carthage worry about their own supply lines and logistics. Commander Steve Parker led one of these teams. He had been the tactical officer on the Valiant at Valara 7. Now he commanded his own small ship and a crew of 12. They were raiders operating without support, living off what they could steal or scavenge. Steve's team hit a Carthage supply depot in the middle of the night. They destroyed 6 months' worth of stored food and fuel. Then they disappeared before the Carthage could respond. A week later, they hit another depot 2 systems away. The Carthage were forced to dedicate ships to guarding their supply lines, ships they couldn't use to attack human colonies. The war settled into a brutal pattern. The Carthage had the advantage in direct combat, but the humans were slippery and creative. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, and ambushes. The Carthage couldn't predict where the humans would strike next. Lieutenant Maria Santos became famous across human space for her actions during the Battle of Gateway Station. She was a fighter pilot protecting a civilian evacuation when 6 Carthage interceptors caught her alone. Her ship was damaged, shields failing, and she was out of ammunition. She could have ejected and let the Carthage destroy the civilian transport she was protecting. Instead, she rammed her fighter into the lead Carthage ship. The collision destroyed her fighter and killed 2 Carthex interceptors. It bought enough time for the civilian transport to escape with 2,000 people aboard. Maria survived. She was found in her escape pod 3 days later, badly injured but alive. They had to amputate her left arm, but she refused to retire. 6 months later, she was back in a fighter cockpit with a prosthetic arm, leading her squadron against Carthex raiders on Earth. Civilian engineer Jack Turner was working on a project that might change the war. He had gotten his hands on pieces of a destroyed Carthex ship. He spent months studying their shield technology, trying to understand how it worked. Carthex shields were better than human shields, but Jack thought he knew why. They used a different frequency pattern. If he could adapt that to human ships, it would make them much harder to damage. Jack worked 18 hours a day in his lab. His wife worried about him. His friends said he was obsessed, but he knew that better shields meant fewer dead humans. Every day the war continued, people died. He could save some of them if he could just figure this out. On a Wednesday morning at 3 a.m, he solved it. He ran through the calculations 3 times to be sure, then sent his findings to military command. Within 2 weeks, every human warship was being retrofitted with the new shields. Jack Turner's invention saved thousands of lives over the next few months. The Galactic Council was watching the war with growing concern. The Carthex expected an easy victory, a quick punishment that would put humanity in its place. Instead, they were getting bogged down in a grinding conflict that was costing them resources and ships. Some species quietly started providing support to humanity. The Therian Collective shared intelligence about Carthex fleet movements. A species called the Mirandi allowed human ships to refuel at their stations. None of it was official. None of it was acknowledged publicly. But it helped. Young diplomat Nicole Green was sent on a secret mission to the Therian homeworld. Her job was to secure formal support from the collective. She met with their leaders in a private chamber and made her case. The Carthex are a threat to everyone, Nicole said. They conquer and enslave. If they defeat humanity, they'll move on to other species. Help us stop them now before they come for you. The Therian leader was old and cautious. If we help you openly, the Carthex will attack us too. They'll attack you eventually anyway, Nicole said. At least this way, you'll have allies when they do. The Therian debated for days. In the end, they agreed to provide intelligence and safe harbor for human ships, but no military support. It wasn't everything Nicole had hoped for, but it was something. The war reached its turning point at the Battle of Proxima Station. The Carthex launched a major offensive, sending 50 warships to destroy humanity's largest military base outside of Earth. If they succeeded, it would cripple Earth's ability to project force. Admiral Morrison, promoted after Valara 7, was in command of the station's defense. He had 30 ships and the station's weapons platforms. The odds were bad. The battle lasted 14 hours. Ships burned on both sides. The space around Proxima Station became a graveyard of destroyed vessels and floating debris. Morrison's forces fought desperately, but they were being overwhelmed. The war dragged on for another year after Morrison's death, but everyone could see the writing on the wall. The Carthex Dominion was exhausted. They had expected a quick victory over the upstart humans. Instead, they had gotten a grinding conflict that cost them ships, soldiers, and resources. Their economy was suffering. Their people were tired of war. Humanity wasn't doing much better. The 3 destroyed colonies were constant reminders of the price they had paid. 20,000 dead in the initial attacks and thousands more killed in the fighting that followed. Earth's military was stretched thin, and the constant state of alert was wearing on everyone. But humanity had something the Carthex didn't expect: allies. Quietly, carefully, other species had started supporting the human war effort. The Therian Collective provided intelligence and supplies. The Villani, despite their own rebuilding efforts, sent volunteers to serve on human ships. Even some members of the Galactic Council were secretly hoping humanity would win, though they'd never say so publicly. The turning point came when 3 more species publicly announced support for humanity. They were all smaller nations, species that had been threatened by the Carthex in the past. They had watched humanity fight back and realized they didn't have to live in fear anymore. The Carthex High Command held an emergency meeting. They looked at the numbers and didn't like what they saw. The humans were getting stronger, not weaker. More species were joining their side. The war could drag on for years, maybe decades. And for what? Pride? Revenge? We should negotiate, one general said. It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. The others reluctantly agreed. The Carthax reached out to Earth through neutral intermediaries. They wanted to discuss terms for ending the war. Ambassador Helen Price represented humanity at the peace talks. She sat across from the Carthax delegation in a neutral space station and listened to their proposals. They wanted a ceasefire, a return to pre-war borders, and mutual recognition of territorial boundaries. And what about reparations? Helen asked. You killed 20,000 of our civilians. You destroyed 3 of our colonies. The Carthax representative, a scarred general named Kresh, looked uncomfortable. We could discuss compensation. We don't want your money, Helen said. We want a guarantee that you'll never attack another species without provocation. We want you to withdraw from all territories you've seized in the last 50 years. We want you to free all the slaves you've taken from conquered worlds. Kresh's scales flushed dark with anger. You ask too much. You did not win this war. It was a stalemate. Then we'll keep fighting, Helen said calmly. We can do this for another 10 years if we need to. Can you? The negotiations took 3 months. In the end, the Carthax agreed to most of humanity's demands. They would withdraw from disputed territories. They would free their slaves over a period of 5 years. They would pay reparations to the human colonies. And they would agree to a non-aggression pact with humanity and its allies. It wasn't everything Helen wanted, but it was more than anyone had expected. The war was over. Humanity had survived. The peace treaty was signed on a Thursday morning. Across human space, people celebrated. Ships fired their weapons into empty space in salute. Strangers hugged each other in the streets. The nightmare was over, but the galaxy had changed. Humanity had proven itself in a way that couldn't be ignored. They had responded to a distress call when the Galactic Council wouldn't. They had fought a war against a superior enemy and survived. They had made allies and changed the political landscape. The Galactic Council was forced to acknowledge this new reality. They held a vote on humanity's status. After heated debate, they granted Earth full membership in the Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that came with it. But Helen Price stood before the Council with a condition. We'll join, she said, but only if the Council adopts a mutual defense charter. Any member species that sends out a distress call must be answered. No more debates about whether it's convenient or profitable to help. No more letting people die because it's politically complicated. The Council erupted in argument. Many species were uncomfortable with such a commitment. What if helping one member meant conflict with another power? What if the cost was too high? But the smaller species, the ones who lived in fear of larger neighbors, supported the idea. The Villani sent a delegation to speak in favor of it. So did the species that had allied with humanity during the war. The humans came when we called, Sigtal said, speaking to the Council. He was older now, a trained soldier and a representative of his people. They lost thousands of their own to save us. They didn't ask what was in it for them. They didn't calculate the political cost. They just came. That's what civilization should mean. That's what this council should be. The vote was close, but it passed. The Galactic Council adopted the Mutual Defense Charter. Any distress call from any member species would be answered by all members. It was a fundamental change in how galactic politics worked. Commander Lisa Grant was promoted to captain and given command of humanity's first deep space diplomatic vessel, the Horizon. Her mission was to make contact with unaligned species and offer them protection and alliance. Earth was building a new coalition based on mutual support and shared defense. Lisa was 58 now, close to retirement age, but she took the assignment eagerly. She had been at Valara 7. She had seen what happened when good people stood by and did nothing. She would spend her final years making sure that never happened again. On Valara 7, the colony had been rebuilt. The cities were newer and stronger than before. The population was growing as refugees from other Carthax-occupied worlds settled there. And in the center of the main city stood a memorial. It was a simple monument, a black stone wall with 73 names carved into it. The names of the humans who had died defending the colony. Below the names, an inscription in both human and Villani languages. They came when called. They gave everything. We will remember. Sigtal visited the memorial every day. He was a lieutenant in the Villani Defense Force now, trained by human instructors equipped with human weapons. He had dedicated his life to making sure his people could defend themselves. But he never forgot who had saved them when they couldn't. He stood before the memorial and read the names. He knew the story behind each one. Jack Turner, who had given his medical supplies to a Volani child. Sarah Klein, who had died shielding her students. Admiral Morrison, who had rammed his ship into the enemy flagship to protect Proxima Station. "Thank you," Sigtal said quietly to the names. "We're still here because of you." On Earth, a new generation was growing up with the stories of the war. Children learned about Admiral Morrison and the rescue of Valara 7. They learned about Maria Santos, who had crashed her fighter to save a transport full of civilians. They learned about all the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. Kate Phillips was teaching now at the military academy. She was 45 years old and had seen enough combat for a lifetime. She taught young officers about communications and coordination, but more importantly, she taught them about duty and honor. "The galaxy is a big place," she told her students, "and it's full of people who need help. Sometimes that help will be convenient. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes helping will cost you nothing. Sometimes it will cost you everything. But when someone calls for help when they're desperate and dying, you answer. That's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be good." The Galactic Council met 1 year after the peace treaty was signed. They had a new distress call to discuss. A species called the Mirandi, living on the edge of civilized space, was under attack by pirates. The call had come in that morning. The council chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered the last time this had happened, when the Volani had called for help. Everyone remembered how the council had voted to do nothing, and how the humans had gone anyway. Ambassador Helen Price stood up. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes, but her voice was strong and clear. "Earth responds to this distress call," she said. "We're dispatching ships immediately. Who else will join us?" There was a moment of hesitation. Then the Volani delegate stood. "Valara 7 sends ships," the Therian delegate stood. "The collective will provide support vessels." One by one, 6 more species stood and pledged their support. Then 8. Then all 12 council members had committed to the rescue mission. It was a moment that would have been impossible 2 years ago. The council, which had once debated for hours before deciding to do nothing, had just committed to a rescue mission in minutes. Helen smiled. Humanity hadn't just survived joining the galactic community. They had changed it. They had shown the galaxy that mercy and courage mattered, that some things were worth fighting for. That civilization meant more than just profit and politics. The fleet assembled quickly. Human ships, Volani ships, Therian ships, and others all coming together to answer a distress call. Commander Steve Parker was leading the human contingent. He had been a raider during the war, but now he was a protector. As the fleet prepared to jump to the Mirandi system, Steve thought about Admiral Morrison, the man who had started all of this by making one simple choice: to help people who needed it. "This is for you, Jake," Steve said quietly. "We're still answering the call.